You've been given this second chance. Now, what are you going to do, Katharine? How are you going to make life the way you really wanted it? How are you going to live it the way it was supposed to be lived?
That you've taken your cardiac event and now you are using as fuel to help transform other people's lives.
Welcome back, everyone, to a Mindset Medicine podcast. I am your host, Katharine Loucaidou. And as you know, if you have been tuning in, this is our 4th season. And we talk about mindset, business mastery, momentum. But we really, the goal at the end of the day is we really just want you living your best life. And if we can shift your perspective in any way, that's the goal. So today I have a wonderful guest, Michael O'Brien, and I'm going to give a little bit of information about Michael right before we dive in, because we've got some really great stories that we're going to tell. Michael's going to unfold what he's been doing and some of the life-changing experiences he's had. So Michael, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Katharine, great to see you. I can't wait for our conversation. It's going to be great.
It will. So here's a little tidbit about Michael. Michael empowers companies to transform challenging moments into opportunities for growth. From surviving a near-death cycling accident to cycling 3,600 miles across America in 41 days after a knee replacement is pretty amazing. On the business side, he is a best-selling author, a speaker, and an executive leadership coach on a mission to inspire lasting change. He has a background in executive leadership, diversity, equity, and inclusion, endurance sports, and meditation instruction. We know what I love about that. I love the fact that you are taking on the holistic approach to life in its truest sense, where you literally go from executive leadership to meditation and endurance sports. So let's just dive in. Tell me about Michael. Michael, tell me a little bit about, where you came from. Where did a lot of this passion for all these different things that you do, where did it start from? Where did it come from?
Such a great question. In some ways, I don't know. But in other ways, I can share a little bit more. So I grew up in Rochester, New York, and I grew up pretty much in a lower middle class lifestyle. And that's all I knew. And I was just following my parents. My mom was a nurse. My dad was in sales. And I thought, okay, here's what you do. You try to get through high school. I got through high school. I wasn't the best student, but I wasn't the worst student. I was the student that it's easy, I think, for teachers to not see, because I wasn't going to an Ivy League school and I wasn't going to detention. So I was right there in the middle. And I think if you're in the middle, it can feel invisible at times.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you go to high school, you go to university, you go to college, you get a gig, you meet someone, you marry someone, you start to have kids, you move up the corporate ladder, and then you take on personalities, or you follow role models. And at the time I was coming up, the role model for leadership were these strong men, command and control, like a Jack Welch from GE. Yeah. And I thought, okay, that's what leadership is like. Leadership is tough, it's commanding. Yes. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of what I thought. And I was following the script pretty well. I got the gig, married this amazing woman. And then we have 2 daughters. We moved from Washington, D.C. I went to school in Virginia up to New Jersey. And I was like, all right, we're doing this thing.
Yes.
This is it. And then I had a life-changing moment, which we'll get into. And that changed everything.
How that happens, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. My world got tipped upside down. It was shaken violently. And luckily, I was given an opportunity to begin again, which is a principle in meditation and mindfulness, to simply begin again. And it wasn't so simple, but I did have an opportunity to start all over.
I love that. Okay, so why don't we talk about that first idea? Because I think it's really important, is that these role models, or the idea of what it's supposed to look like, what we're supposed to be like in these positions, And then the interesting thing is, as we get older and more experienced, that whole idea just starts to crumble slowly, I've realized over the years. And you're just like, what? Those people there's really nothing that special about them at the end of the day. And, we put them on this pedestal because they have these positions of power, but then you realize they got there because they had just these certain behaviors. So why don't we dig into that a little bit about what your experience in the corporate world, it sounds like, is where you were?
Yeah, the corporate world, and even a little bit of the entrepreneurial world. So in the corporate world, you have these big iconic leaders, and that's leadership, and it's the stuff that's written about on LinkedIn today or Forbes magazine or Wall Street Journal. And you think, okay, that's it. To be a leader, you got to be tough. And then even in an entrepreneurial space, you look at influencers or people on the surface through social media, they look like they're doing it, right? They're crushing it. And then when you have an opportunity to get closer to them, and I've been lucky, I've had a chance to get sort of behind the scenes with some big corporate leaders, as well as some like what we would think is very successful entrepreneurs. And you sit down and you realize they're just like us.
Absolutely.
Like they might have a really beautiful exterior, but below the water surface, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And in some ways, not to diminish their talent, but they were in the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. They caught the wave, not necessarily because of anything they did. Some people came up with a really great innovation, and that's how they rode the wave towards success. But a lot of folks were just in the right place at the right time. And, some people know some things and other people know other things. And you realize, okay, we all know something. Mm-hmm. And we all, there's a concept, Japanese art form called kintsugi. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
I haven't heard that word before, no.
Yeah, so kintsugi, I actually have a kintsugi bowl on my desk. So you'll be able to see it, but the listeners won't. But it's what happens when pottery breaks.
Oh, so, yes. Okay. I know the concept.
The concept. So so you have this beautiful bowl of pottery. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. And then as pottery does, sometimes it gets dropped. So it cracks, it chips, it breaks. And I think us humans do as well. Like we have our moments where we chip and crack and break. And they heal the pottery through this lacquer. And we can heal ourselves through mindful medicine, and we can be put back together. And what happens is when we heal, it leaves a scar line. In kintsugi pottery, that scar is dusted with gold. So the lacquer is dusted with gold and creates this beautiful scar, golden scar. It's called the golden repair. So what it symbolizes is that it can be beautiful, but then it can crack and be put back together, and it can still be beautiful. And we celebrate our imperfections. We see those scars as golden symbols of our strength and resilience. And I think the same can be said for us. So when we get really honest and more mindful, we realize we're all going through stuff. We all know something, and other people know other things. Like no one's got hierarchy over anyone else. Just from a human design and humanity perspective, we're all a little bit kintsugi. And when we do that, we can soften this grip on what we think is ideal. And we can really start living a more authentic life, which is a healthier life to live.
Wow. I'll tell you what was going through my mind as you're unveiling that story and you're talking about it. It's really fascinating because I realized, so at 33, I had a massive heart attack, triple bypass surgery, open heart surgery. I had all of that going on when I was very young. And when you're a 33-year-old woman and that happened and you have scars now down your chest, down your leg because of it, it was exactly what you just did. You have this option to repair, right? So you repair and you have this scar. And then what do you do with that scar? So at 33, until probably the age of 45, I did whatever I could to hide the scars. Huge necklaces, always wore pants, didn't wear dresses and skirts anymore. It was all about hiding the scar. And then one day at 45, I just kind of sat around and I thought, what am I doing? Why do I have to hide it? Why am I ashamed that this happened? I mean, it was a hurt instant, nothing I could do about it. From then on, I said, to hell with the jewelry. I never put on a big chunky piece of jewelry again. I'll wear shorts, I wear skirts. I do not care anymore, because for me, they're just the experiences that I have been through, right? And so they're just an indication. And for some people, you can see the scars, and for some people, you can't. But I love the fact that they make the cracks in the pottery gold. They're not even trying to hide it. Let's just turn it into something of beauty now. And I think that for me, from let's say the age of 40, 45, that's what I've been trying to do, is turn mindset and the shift that you can have into a thing of beauty. Because all of a sudden, the world just looks so much different when you do. When you stop hiding, the world becomes a much different place.
I love that, Katharine. Yeah, you can exhale. And here's something crazy is like, so my big event also happened when I was 33.
Really?
And I did just like you. I tried to do everything to hide all my scars because I have a bunch of them. Some are minor, some are pretty big skin grafts. And I would wear long pants, I would cover up, just everything you just said.
Yeah.
And here it is down in New York. It's like 95 degrees and humid as all get out in the summer. And I'm all bundled up because I thought the story I was telling myself is that if people saw my scars, they'd be like, what happened to that guy? Like, that guy's less than, that I'm flawed, right?
Absolutely.
And I was watching a movie with my youngest. She may have been around 8 at the time. And she was just almost mindlessly just using her finger to trace my scars. And I was like, hey, Grady, what do you think of Dad's scars? And she's like, I think they're cool. Yeah. And I'm like, like she thinks they're cool. Like she doesn't think they're ugly. I'm like, well, if she thinks they're cool, why can't I think they're cool? And, and from that, I discovered Kintsugi and just that whole like, they're gold. It's out there. It's the defining piece of the pottery now. So let's celebrate them instead of hiding behind filters or whatever. Let's just celebrate our gray hairs, our wrinkles, and blemishes, because they are symbols. Like we're living a life well lived. Like we're living an authentic life, and it's so much easier when we actually let go a bit. Yeah.
Well, it is, and also the fact that we're still here. Like
we're still here. Yeah.
Right? Like, why were we hiding from that fact that we made it through, whatever is the trauma that people go through, rather than being ashamed or trying to hide from it? Like, you've got to shift the perspective and say, for God's sake, you made it here. Not many people do, right? Look outside every day. So many people don't make it through so many different issues and things and traumas, and we did. So that's something to celebrate. So, I love the fact that you brought that up in that beautiful bowl, because it really is symbolic. And I think that is a really good symbol that you have sitting there in your office, because at any point that you forget, right, or you start going backwards and thinking, oh, this and that, you just look at that bowl and you see, there it is. There's the gold.
Yeah, that's why I have it here, as a reminder, because I still have, even after all my meditation training and all the stuff in my career, I still have my moments. I still have my moments where I'm like, I'm less than, or I have a flaw and I don't want someone to, to see it, or like, in my mid 50s, I still get pimples. I'm like, oh, come on, like, isn't high school over? Like, whatever it is, or it can be something, as you mentioned, it may not be something visible to most. Like we have emotional scars as well. And if the conditions are right, some of that pain from when I was younger, just like yourself or anyone listening, comes up, right? And so looking at that bowl is like, that's a reminder to slow it down, come back home, come back to your breath, and realize, okay, you've got this. You've gotten through all your hard moments. You're here, as you mentioned. Like there's survivorship. There's thriving ship, if that's a word, but just that resilience and grit to say, hey, we're still here, we're still in it, and we're still putting a beautiful ripple into the world.
100%. Well, I would love to come back to, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, like where you started your career, and then how did that unfold and how did it change along the way? When did you realize that you sort of wanted to maybe branch out into something different or maybe something more passionate to you? Walk us through that.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I started in sales and then got into pharmaceutical sales, actually, following my mom's career as a nurse and my dad's career as a salesperson. And I was pretty good at it. So I started moving up the corporate ladder and took a job into marketing. And when I was the marketing director for the biggest product for Alzheimer's disease, the biggest drug for it at the time, that's when I had my accident. That's when I had what I call my last bad day. I was hit head on by a Ford Explorer while I was out on a bike training ride. It was going about 40 miles an hour. So what's that, about like 70-ish in kilometers per hour?
Yeah.
I broke a whole bunch of everything, Katharine. The doctors told my wife, we're really not sure how your husband survived. Had he been 10 years older or not healthy, he would have died before he got to the hospital because of the intensity of the injury. And I lacerated the femoral artery of my left leg. So I was losing a lot of blood. So it's a miracle that I'm here. I was chasing my happiness back in those days, working the corporate ladder, working the belief that we were given in the 80s and the 90s, like what success looks like. I bought into that. I was following that script.
Yeah.
And when I came out of the ICU, they told me about my injuries and they predicted a pretty grim future for me. They're like, you're going to have some challenges in life. You're probably going to walk with difficulty. You're never going to get back on your bike again. You're going to have a lot more surgery, a lot more pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I was like, wow, like if I can't be who I was, even though I wasn't necessarily happy with that, who am I going to be? Right? And so I didn't see it as this great new, simply begin again. I thought it was terror. It was chaos. And then eventually I came into this belief through a mentor that all the events in your life are neutral until you label them. So there's neutrality. Things happen. And then as humans, we give it labels and we give labels really quickly. Good, bad, right, wrong.
All based on our experience, our limited experience in life.
Our limited experience of like how we grew up, what we've been exposed to. Yeah. And so he told me, he's like, listen, you have every right to label yourself as a victim. Like, look at you. You're a mess. So and I was a mess. He goes, but you don't have to label yourself that way. This may have happened for you, not to you.
I love that statement. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe there's a different way to look at this. And so I sat with that a bit. I found the practice of gratitude. I found the practice of meditation and mindfulness. And then I realized, okay, if I can call that day anything I want, I'm going to call it my last bad day. Not because of unicorns and rainbows, but because each day we live moments. Some moments are joyous and exciting and awesome, and other moments are really tough. We struggle, we grieve. They're bad, if you will. And we give those moments, it's sort of in the parable of first arrow, second arrow, we give those bad moments more fuel and they turn into a bad day or longer. So what I realized is that if I can go to bed each night and my head hits the pillow and my girls and my wife are in my life and other people who love me and I love back are in my life, how can I call the whole day a bad day?
Right.
It's a day. It's a day filled with a whole bunch of different emotions, different feelings, different moments, and it's a day. And I'm not going to label it as a bad day because once you do, then all your energy, as you know, goes down the hole. Oh, bad day. And then you bring everyone else around you.
Well, then the bad day turns into the bad weeks, the bad months, the bad year.
And then it's like a bad life. And it's not to say that we should deny intense feelings, and it's not so literal. So if we have, say, a moment of grief, Like I lost my mother through the pandemic, and a lot of people lost loved ones. And that is so sad, and we grieve, right? And that we might look at that as like a really intense feeling that lasts more than a moment, that can last more than a day. We may never ever get past losing a loved one.
Yeah.
But it's also coming up with that, or finding the awareness, hopefully through mindfulness, that we can have that feeling of grief, but we can also feel love, and we can feel joy. We can feel multiple things all at the same time, us humans. That's one of our superpowers.
Yeah.
So although I grieve for my mom, I also know there's a bunch of love in my life.
Mm.
And so I'm not going to call that day a bad day. It was a day filled with a lot of different feelings. And so I'm not going to live my life in these binary labels. I'm going to be more open to them.
Yeah.
And it's one of the healthiest things I've discovered along the way in terms of my mindset, and which has impacted my overall health in a tremendously positive way.
Yeah. And it does. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think that this is what people don't realize is the power of your mind. It really does have the capability of moving you from an unhealthy state to a healthy state, whether it's physical or emotional or psychological. It really is all tied into how you are perceiving that situation. I often give an example when I'm coaching people. You get a text message on your phone, right, from someone, and maybe it's someone in business, or it could be a spouse, and it says, "We need to talk," right? That can be interpreted in 100 different ways, right? And most people's default is, "Oh my God, there's something wrong. Oh, they're gonna leave. They're gonna stop working with me." And it goes on and on. And maybe it was said in, "Hey, we need to talk. Like, let's plan dinner. But our mind automatically has this default setting to the negative. So my practice was, in recuperating and changing my mindset about what had happened to me, because I was all caught in the, why me, right? Like, why did this happen to me? And what did I do wrong? And I thought I was healthy and all of these things, when I just kept saying, okay, well, we don't really need to know why me. I'm just glad that I'm still here. So now what are we going to do with that? Right? You've been given this second chance. Now, what are you going to do, Katharine? How are you going to make life the way you really wanted it? How are you going to live it the way it was supposed to be lived? So this change in our mind, even about like simple things like what we're eating, right? We have a choice of this, or we have a choice of this. So I've just noticed that it really is the mind that just determines everything: your success, your health, your relationships. You can wake up and you can find fault in your spouse or in your friends or your colleagues, or you can wake up and say, okay, what do I appreciate about them today? Two totally different ways of looking at the same situation. But one of those ways is going to lead you through a better day than the other one is.
I love it. I love the fact that you've taken like your bad moment, your cardiac event, and now you are using it as fuel to help transform other people's lives. I think that's the real power of some of these really hard moments that we go through. Like once we go through them, it can be a gift to other people. But what you just said, the mindset matters so much. So I came from the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
And what the pharmaceutical companies don't really communicate is like, our drugs are effective as they are, but you know what? In the clinical trials that we talk about, there's also a placebo arm, a sugar pill, and the placebo is also effective.
Yes, it is.
So there was one study I'm familiar with one of our products where the drug was, say, 88% effective, and the placebo was 68% effective. So here it is. The placebo has no active medicine in it, but just the act of taking it, of going to the doctor and paying attention to your health differently, all of a sudden people feel better.
Yes.
So the whole the whole concept of like placebo effect, it works. So it's mindset. And
It is, yes.
to your earlier point, it's like, we go where our eyes go. Like wherever we're looking, we can find fault in a whole bunch. We can also though open up our aperture and see the good in it. So the people around us, yeah, they have little flaws, just like that kintsugi art. So do we. And if we can just accept them, like, all right, you're perfectly human. You got some amazing qualities, and you have some things that are like, you know, golden scars, right? So it's all of it, and we can embrace all of it, and that is just a healthier way of approaching life.
Well, and I also find it easier. Like, who wants to wake
Yeah.
up being miserable? It takes a lot of work to go through the day very miserable. It's just not even a pleasant way of doing things. And I know early on when I started thinking like this, and I was talking to people, and some people are like, wow, you're just overly positive. I'm like, no, not really. I mean, I still have negative thoughts, but I just choose not to dwell in them, because if I do, it just doesn't serve me at all. Right? It just doesn't move me forward in life. It doesn't help me accomplish. It makes my thoughts cloudy if I'm always negative. I can't even have some clarity of where I want to go if I'm being negative. But talking about where I want to go, so what I'd like to know is what you then did. Where did your journey take you? After you stopped, I imagine that you stopped the sales and you moved into a different
Yeah. So actually, to that point, I didn't really stop.
Okay.
So what happened, and this is different than I think for what might happen for others, at least based on what people have told me, is that after I left the hospital, I still had more surgeries. I've had probably 15 surgeries
Oh my
and
goodness.
a whole bunch of rehab. I went back to my corporate life because I did have that question, that existential question. You probably wrestled with it too. Like, what happens when you almost die? Like, what do you do? Like, what's your responsibility? So I thought, okay, well, I'm supposed to go off trekking in Nepal in the Himalayas and find myself, right? And I was like, well, like I got a mortgage to pay. That
I
doesn't
was literally just going to say,
like,
unfortunately, your passion does not pay you immediately.
yeah, because like I have a wife, a family to support, two young girls, so that didn't seem responsible. And then I thought, oh, I'm gonna do something physically amazing. I'm gonna do the Ironman. And then I was like, well, that takes up a lot of time. And so many people gave up their time to help support me when I was at my lowest. That seems a bit selfish and
Right.
somewhat egocentric to do a Ironman. Then I was like, well, all right, so I'll screw all the for-profit company stuff. I'll work for a nonprofit. And then I was like, well, there's still a lot of like issues there. So I decided to go back to my corporate life, but with a different way, a different mindset, a different script.
Yep.
And that different script actually helped me elevate to the C-suite. I think without my accident, without this newfound way of looking at life, a new mindset, I don't make it to the C-suite. So I did that all along knowing that I would get into this line of work of coaching, of speaking about change, about resilience, and also furthering my meditation study. So in the hospital, I found meditation, and that's where I started my practice. And then I continued my studies as I was doing my corporate career. So I did that for 13 more years. So everything I talk about in terms of mindset has been time tested in the trenches in corporate life.
Yes.
So it's not like I read a book and now I'm just sharing the book. I'm like, I'm living it.
Yeah.
I did it in corporate life. And now I help corporations do it today, learning from my lessons of like what to do and what not to do.
Yes.
And then through my meditation app, helping people just like slow things down a bit, come back to their breath, and see the benefit of what it means to live mindfully, which can change everyone's perspective of life.
100%. So why don't we move on then to what you're currently doing? So what is it that you like to focus on now today, these days?
Well, I still love helping leaders. I love working with corporate leaders because I do think we're at this moment in time where we can change how we work together. And, here in the US, we spend so much time at work that I believe if we can change how we work together, we can also change how we live together because commerce and business is such a driving force in our culture.
Mhm.
So leaders can make that happen. Also, employees can make it happen as well. So I still love that work. And I still love speaking with companies about, hey, what happens when the unexpected happens, which, hey, happens all the time in business. Like, what do you do? How do you respond to those really difficult, let's say, bad moments?
Mhm.
And then the other thing I'm doing is really bringing mindfulness to everyone through my pause, breathe, reflect app. So I'm a big believer in micro moments of meditation. My
Okay.
practice, though, was a 45-minute practice. And let's be honest, not too many people have 45 minutes a day to sit on a cushion. So I'm trying to meet people where they're at. So I'm a big believer that if you don't have 10 minutes in the morning to meditate,
Mhm.
that's cool. Meet you where you're at. I bet you have 5 times throughout the day where you have 2 minutes
Right.
or 10 times where you have a minute. And so when we weave it throughout our day, it becomes a way of living. So
Yes.
now we can just like tap, drop in, connect with our breath, slow things down, and let go of some stress, maybe open up our aperture or our awareness, see things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so for us here, the reflect piece of pause, breathe, reflect is vital because that reflect piece is about, hey, what do I see? Where can I practice gratitude? What do I want to say or do next? Setting our intentions.
Mm-hmm.
So the practice isn't just about, oh, you're going to breathe for a minute and you're going to it's going to solve the world's problem. The reflect piece is that intentionality, that contemplation, so we can put a really positive ripple into the world.
That's really great. That's really great. And I think, especially today in this day and age, and how quick everything is, and how immediate everyone wants everything, and how, it's constant, it's text, it's emails constantly. I think it's really important that people stop and take a moment, no matter what you call it, whether it's breathing, meditating. You do need to just stop and I think that it's important that you do it throughout the day, exactly like you said, because if you don't learn to catch your breath, you're just going through life like you're not being present. And so often I will just stop and I'll just look outside, and today there's a snowstorm and so on, but just stop. What does that look like? What does it sound like today? Right? What does the snow feel like when you're stepping on it in the crunch? Like, if you can just take in those sounds, you are now being present. And
Absolutely.
I had
Yeah.
to learn to be that. And I'll tell you, the most present I've ever been was when I was discharged from the hospital. I remember, till this day, it's as if I'm sitting in the front seat of the car, and the sky has never looked so blue than that day when I was discharged. It was like I was seeing it through different eyes, which I probably was, because when they remove your heart and put it back in and restart you, it's like this reset's been happening.
That
So,
is incredible. Oh, that's such a great picture, Catherine, like that. Yeah, that picture of that blue sky. It's probably
well, and I was
clear.
living on a
Yeah.
Mediterranean island, so it was
Oh,
really cold,
wow.
and it was hot
Wow.
outside, but it was just, I don't know, till this day, it's almost like, and growing up in Rochester and being in New Jersey now, you understand what I mean. When you go on vacation to a really warm, colorful island, you get there and that hot wind hits you when you come out of the airport. That feeling is your present, right? All of a sudden, you can feel like you can smell the air. It smells different than where you live. You can feel it. It's a different sense. And if you could stay in that, no matter where you are, not just when you're on vacation, but driving home, put your window down. I'll come out in the morning in my house because I know I live on 2 acres, 3 acres, and there's a smell of nature early in the morning. If you can learn to embrace some of that, you will live in a I don't want to say better because it's very judgmental. For me, it's better, but I think you will just learn to be in gratitude more often. Like, wow, look how beautiful this is. Look up at the sky at night. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I think you live more awake.
Yes.
Like you can appreciate this. Obviously, I can growing up where I grew up, but when you go outside during winter, there's a smell of like when you know a storm's coming.
Yes.
So you tap into all of your senses. You wake up to life, and that's what we're talking about. So there's that awareness. So you wake up to your senses, and then you can also wake up to each other. And we start to connect with ourselves differently. We connect with each other differently. And in a divided world, what I think we thirst for is connection. There'll be forces that will try to break us apart because that's how they feel they can win.
Yes.
But more like-heartedness hopefully can bring us together to say, okay, we're in this. Yeah. We got some big things to solve. Let's try to solve them. Let's hear each other out. Let's have that type of conversation. So I think living with this abundant mindset that you talk about is so critical because we start to see things differently or see things like we're seeing them for the very first time, like that blue sky. And then life becomes more magical. It's pretty awesome.
It actually does. It is. It's much more magical. So this has been really great. And I want to end with a couple last things. What's next for you?
Oh, gosh. I don't know.
What would you like to be next?
Yeah. So what I desire is for 8 billion people all across this big blue marble that we share to take a minute once a day to pause, breathe, reflect. I think if we all took a minute and just slow down and connected with our breath for a minute a day, we would have a more peaceful planet. I think that notion of like having space, like you mentioned this earlier, the going. We just don't have space. I was talking to a client before we got on, and she's been going. And her body basically said, okay, we're shutting it down. And
that's what your body will do.
Yeah. Yes. And 5 hours later, she didn't move. And so I think taking like little mini breaks, micro breaks, a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, that can prevent like the need to like lie on the couch for 5 hours. I just think that's what I'm hoping for the world. Like peace is one of my great values. So I'm hoping for a more peaceful planet. And if I can have some influence on that, that would be great. So I have some big cycling events coming up, that really will sort of test my mental fitness and my physical fitness. But for me, it's really bringing pause, breathe, reflect to more people to say, hey, listen, because I'm really trying to reach people that haven't meditated. They don't have a practice yet. So there are people out there that are really expert meditators and they're going to retreats and all that jazz. Awesome. Like, go for it. Continue doing it. But that person that's sort of on the fence, like, I don't know if I know how to do this, or I think I'm doing it wrong. I'm not a monk, but I am a trained teacher. And I want to bring those people in to say, hey, you can do this. And this is a way to see life differently, to live differently. And I hope to bring as many people into the practice as I possibly can.
I love it. And I'm sure you will. Sometimes it's just a repeat of a message over and over until
over and over
again it begins to click, and everyone will click at the time when it needs to click for them, or sometimes it's a little late, but hopefully it will be done. Well, this has been a pleasure. And how can people reach out to you if they want to find you on social media or get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, Katharine, again, I want to thank you for the work you're doing and the message you're putting into the world. It's needed. And thanks for having me on the show. So people can get the app. It's called Pause, Breathe, Reflect on Apple's App Store or Google Play. And our pricing is pretty innovative. You can pay what you're willing to pay for the first year. So people can join for the first year for as little as $1. So there's really no barrier in at least trying to come into what mindfulness can be. So you can get the app there. You can also find me at michaelobrienshift.com Also pausebreathereflect.com. And then through there, you can find all the different links to all the different social platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn and all that jazz.
Wonderful. It's been a pleasure, Michael. Thank you. And I think people are coming around to the idea that that it is in the mind, and if you just slow down long enough, you will realize that there's so much more than just the busyness that you're involved in every day.
Yeah, I agree. I think going through the pandemic was a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Not everyone, some people are still hitting snooze. That's okay. But a lot of people have taken the call to live life differently. And we just need more and more people to do that, to get some critical mass, and then we can shift things towards a more peaceful, loving, still productive, but just putting a different vibe out there into the world. So I join you in your optimism and hope.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in this week. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye for now.